it's the art of bombing. Welcome to the Art of Bombing Between Bombs, how to produce your own comedy show, part 3, streaming live on the interwebs. This episode, we are going to be, this is the third part of a 3-part series that we've been doing. The first parts 1 and 2 are on the RSS feed. So if you haven't watched them, you can go do that. They will be coming to YouTube. Hopefully pretty soon. Hopefully I can get that done this weekend, and I'll get the videos up as well. That being said, this week's part 3, we're going to be talking about promoting your show, the things that you need to do. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, my co-producer, Mr. Josh Shirley.
Streaming, baby. California streaming. Stream a little stream.
Mm-hmm.
What else do I got here?
Streaming.
We are the Stream Warriors. How about that, guys? Well, docking. Okay. Guys, this is the third installment of how to produce your own show. First show was table stakes. So in that episode, we covered all the things that we need to have just to get a seat at the table for doing our show. What are the main things we need to do? Second was the show itself. How do we make the performances good when it comes to recruiting and putting other comics on the show? And then our third and final show in this series, unless you're a Patreon subscriber.
If you're a Patreon subscriber, there's a fourth part.
There's a special pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. And that was bad. That was not a good Irish accent, guys. And this third one is how to produce your own comedy show from the lens of promotion. So we're going to talk all about promotion and how to promote your own show to actually get butts in seats. This is going to be exciting. Here we go. So our agenda for tonight. So our must-haves for promo. Let's go ahead and throw everything up on the board here. Sponsorship from the venue. We're going to cover awareness, engagement, and impact activities. And then Art of Bombing, how to produce your own comedy show series installment would be complete without avoiding traps.
Avoiding traps. I felt like you needed like a backup on that one.
Yeah.
Like a hype man.
Yeah.
Avoid traps. Gotta avoid them traps.
Okay. That's a great idea, Dan. And let's just like Bud Light commercial this entire thing. Like you should come in as a hype man, like for the rest of this thing. Like I want to hear a bunch of them.
Randomly, I'm just gonna come in and you're gonna say something and I'm just gonna repeat it.
It's gonna make
be
me
a
laugh.
good time. Real quick though, before we get too far into this presentation, if you do have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, but we're going to address them at the end of the presentation. So I just want to throw that in there quick. So if you have a question, throw it in the chat, but we'll address it towards the end. That's right.
So for those of you following along at home, sponsorship from the venue is critical. We'll get into that first. The next 3 pieces, awareness, engagement, and impact, are all related to each other. So imagine, if you will, a marketing funnel. This marketing funnel has 3 components, and we'll start at the top with awareness, things that we're doing that are a little easier to do, but reach more people, but don't have as much of an effect on what's going to happen. Engagement, a little bit more, and then finally impact is what you use as kind of a mousetrap to get people to actually come to the show. And then we'll end with avoiding traps.
Avoid traps!
But not the mousetrap. Okay. Sponsorship from the venue. Here we go. So it's important when you're working with a venue. This has been a consistent theme for this entire series, is good relationship with your venue. And that's no different when it comes to promo. So make sure that the venue checks the box of having an event listed on their website. You'd be surprised, a lot of patrons of your venue are usually checking their website for either events, specials, all kinds of stuff, and it's a great place for it to be seen. It's no different then, think back to old days when you would walk by somewhere, get some foot traffic, look in the window. It's just as important as having a sign on the window, but obviously a lot more because it's digital, it's virtual. We're streaming a little stream. Now, social mentions also very important. So any venue, most venues are going to have their own social networks and social accounts, and you're going to want them to pimp your show on their Twitter, Facebook. Did I just say Facebook? Your Twitter.
That's like your Facebook is a combination of MySpace and Facebook. It's the next generation of social media.
I don't know why
it's a hybrid.
Yeah, what is happening with me? So on their Facebook page, as well as Instagram, if they have YouTube channel or anything else like that. So just make sure that they're mentioning that. The email newsletters, it's not every venue that has an email crowd, but a lot of times people like to offer incentives to get special word out. So just talk to your venue and see if they have any kind of email newsletter that's going on there. Store signage. So this is an important one. We'll actually cover signage a couple of times on this episode, but store signage, if you've already made posters for your show, or if you're not in the habit of making posters, it's still a good idea to throw maybe a Google slide or something like that together with some artwork and give it to the venue so they can put it up by the register, at the door, where the performance space is going to be, all over the place so that people know what's going on. You'd be surprised what kind of impact that has when you're talking about something that people frequent often.
And I would like to throw in here real quick with that, putting stuff up in the store. If you do get posters and stuff made, I highly recommend getting party flyers, as they call them. It's just a smaller version of your flyer. They're usually 4 by 5 inches in dimensions, but you can get a bunch of them and put them by like the cash registers or like on the tables or the bars or wherever you're, whatever, depending on what the venue is, but you can put them throughout the venue. So then people can just grab them and take them with as well. So
that's right.
A little hack.
To build on that, Dan, that's a good ad, because there's a lot of times you're going to be performing in downtown areas where there's other businesses nearby that support each other. Mm-hmm. And it's not unheard of for you to have that same idea and walk it to the coffee shop across the street, which is closed at that time, but people are still there. You can have another stack of them waiting there. You can put them up in those other businesses that don't necessarily compete with the venue that you're at. And a lot of times they'll support each other and be willing to take something like that.
Yep, absolutely.
So incentives and specials, this is pretty overlooked. When I do shows at a venue that's north of here, it's a coffee shop style venue, but they're always really cool with throwing in like a coffee tumbler or a gift card that they'll let me raffle during the show. So it's fun. People know that when they buy tickets, they also enter themselves into a chance to win something else that's really cool. And for people who don't realize that, they could come and win something, and it's like a special experience for them. So incentives and specials are something you can include in the promotion that you're doing as a pot sweetener for those people who might be on the fence about it. So that's a little cool.
And just some other ideas with that, with some of the incentives that I'd just like to add on. Like if you're doing a brewery, maybe you talk with your partnership with your brewery, and part of the admission is they get their first drink free, or they do like a buy one, get one half off, or if you're at a bar, they do some kind of a drink special or food special, or some, there's all kinds of different ways that you can take that. But those incentives and specials, you definitely want to have that figured out before you do your promotion, so then you can include it with the promoting, because that's going to be things, again, it's an incentive for people to come to your show.
Absolutely. So as you're doing your work, you want to keep your venue informed on the promo that you're doing yourself. And that's important because now they know that you're working on it, and it's going to incentivize them to do it too. So for example, if you have your own email newsletter and you're sending that out, if you're putting it on social and you're creating a Facebook invite and you're getting people through that, if you're up to a certain number of ticket sales, if you're up to a certain number of likes or interesteds or goings on your Facebook invite, you can keep them informed about how that's going. And what that incentivizes them to do is to get on board with promoting the show because they know you're working on it. And a lot of times if they see an email or they get a text from you saying, hey, I've been doing this, just so you know, that prompts them in a way that's professional, where they can go in there and know that they have to reciprocate that and do it because you're doing the work as well. That's a good way to prod someone to get to take action without getting into an uncomfortable situation.
And I'd like to interject something here. This, getting that sponsorship from the venue, this goes back to the very first episode when we were talking about looking for a venue. The sponsorship is also part of your partnership with that venue. And if that venue doesn't want to do these things that you're asking them to do, they're not a good partner. You're not going to have a good outcome or a good working relationship with them. It goes back to finding a venue that's excited to do the show and they're willing to do the things that they can do to help this partnership, so you ultimately have a good show.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. It's a win-win type of deal. You want to bring people in there so they buy drinks and food or whatever, and they want to have a lot of people find out about them and all of that. So it's a win-win. So all right, let's start at the top of the funnel. So the next 3 slides are, think about this, just picture in your mind a funnel. At the very top, the funnel is the widest. So the things that we're going to talk about in this section are the easiest to do, and they're also the things that will reach the greatest number of people quickly and create what we would call impressions. Like I saw advertising for this. If you want to slot all this as advertising, it's all going to sound like advertising. So this stuff reaches a lot of people, and it's going to get a lot of people aware of what's going on, but it's not necessarily the thing that seals the deal. So the job of the channels that you're using in this phase, in this section of the funnel, is really just to let people know that it exists and get them to take the next step in the funnel, not necessarily sell somebody a ticket. Here we go. Online event postings. This is probably the most important point that we'll cover in this section because that's where people are. So think about event postings that are in your area. How do you hear about events? When people are looking for something to do in Omaha, in New York, in Denver, what do? They go to Google, they go to event listings, they go to places that they trust, and they say things to do or stand-up comedy in, enter location. So do the same thing. Go to Google and type in stand-up comedy in wherever you're going to do your show and see what comes up. And make sure that your show is also in those places and try to anticipate the type of searching that people who are looking for things to do are going to find. Now, again, we're talking about people who are looking for a show to come to. These are not people you can impact directly. So you're just trying to make them aware that your show is coming up. And then hopefully with enough engagement, they'll be touched a second time and incentivized to then come and check your show out. So,
yeah, and I just want to add on to that with some of these the online event postings, just to give some people some ideas of some of what that is. Just a couple, it'd be like most city websites have an event page that you can submit events to. Most local publications, like if there's like a local newspaper, their online paper will probably have an event listing, an event calendar. Media stations, your radio, TV, a lot of them have event calendars. A lot of these event calendars are free to submit to. So keep that in mind. It can be time consuming, but it's a good way to, like Josh said, you're building that awareness, because the more your event is listed on all these different calendars and event listing sites, it helps your Google search hit ranking. So the more you're putting it out there, when people look for stand-up comedy, Casper, Wyoming, they're going to see Darren's event because he's got it in every event publication that he can. So keep that in mind.
That's right. So next up is press releases for news and radio. So that's really the way publications or media publications learn about what's going on. They're actually out there looking for that so they can have content. Your show is content for them to put into their newspaper or on radio. So that's an idea for you to submit press releases directly to the publications. And in other cases, you'll actually find aggregated things. So in my local area in Kansas City, we actually have a website where you can enter essentially your event, and that becomes a press release to multiple publications. Those are one of the most valuable things to look for, is listing your event in one place that then gets syndicated out to a lot of others. Eventbrite actually does that. They have a network of sites that they'll syndicate your show to by virtue of you having an event. So keep that in mind, that when a lot of it's hard for Dan and I to tell you exactly where to go on this one because it's so different depending on where
you're
live.
at.
Yeah.
Yep. And again, going back to the first one about the event postings, most online publications, most of your news, radio, on their websites, they will, a lot of times they have an email that's specifically for press releases. So again, it's time consuming because you might have to email everyone. I wish more places had a site like what Josh was talking about, where it builds, you enter your event and it builds you a press release and then sends it out. That's amazing. But most of these news stations have an email or a way to submit a press release. That's all it's for, is press releases. So it's just a matter of doing your due diligence and doing that research.
Absolutely. So last on the awareness building is signage. So again, it may sound a little antiquated to put some advertising for your show in print, but it does work for entertainment. So Dan gave us a great insight earlier about taking, some mini versions of the poster or flyer that are, easy to grab and put it in your pocket next to the cash register somewhere where people are aggregating or congregating. The business across the street, those are good examples. So I used to do a show downtown in Kansas City that was right next to the farmers market on Saturday. And so on Saturdays, they had a big farmers market. And so it was right across the street from the venue. And I got some comedians together and we went and handed out, 200 or so flyers to people this is more of an engagement thing because it's direct, right in someone's face, asking them to come to a show. A little bit different. We'll get into that in a second, but that's another thing you can do with signage.
Well, and real quick on signage too, I just want to interject with, part of that, even if you don't get physical signage, you do want to have some sort of a graphic design, something designed, like a poster of some sort, even if it's a digital version, because it's going to help, you're going to want it for your event posting, your Facebook post. If you do a Facebook event, you're going to want it for Eventbrite. It's good to still have an image. And when you're thinking about doing a poster, if you don't have the graphic design skills, that's okay. Don't be afraid to hire a graphic designer to make you a really kick-ass flyer that, kick-ass poster that when you put it around town, people are going to be like, oh, I want to go to this show because that flyer is catching their attention. But, there's plenty of free sites out there too for making your own flyers, Canva, GIMP, there's a bunch of them. So definitely make some sort of a flyer, even if it's digital, make something.
Yeah, and the graphic designer route can be good too. Good ones will give you a way to redo the poster again and again in a way that they don't have to charge you for making small changes to it. So they essentially build you a template that you can use for your shows. So that's a great idea.
Yeah, and that's what I've been co-producing with a guy here in Loveland. We have our loco comedy And that's what we do. He has a flyer that he's been using for one venue that a graphic designer made him, and now he just changes the names on it. And then I designed a couple of our flyers for some of our other shows. Same thing. We're using the same flyer every time. We've made it so it's a template. All we have to do is change the name, and then the dates and times. We just have to change certain information. But that's a good point. You can get a template made.
That's right. Now, engagement's the next step of the funnel. So the difference between engagement and impact engagement and awareness. Awareness is passive. So anything that you're doing that you, just like a sign is a great example. I put it up, a lot of people see it, but there's nothing active about it. There's nothing, there's no real ask that's happening. So engagement sort of ratchets up
the poster doesn't talk to the people walking by?
Not the ones that I've seen.
When we need to get better posters up in this game.
I know, man. We need to get a time machine as well.
You know what a poster needs? It needs a hype man.
Yeah. Talking posters.
Comedy show.
Yeah. So a poster that barks all by itself. Who needs a comedian? A lot of
barking
comedians.
Poster.
That's right.
That's amazing.
So engagement takes it to where you're actually making the ask of someone. So here's an example. Social. A great place to capture a lot of your social engagement, as well as to measure your social engagement, is the Facebook/Spacebook event. So with Facebook, essentially, you can create an event on Facebook. You can share it with your friends, but you can actually use it to send to people. And most importantly, use the invite feature on it. So I have a piece here, making comics and venue hosts of the actual invite itself is important, not only to make them hosts, but so that they can then invite other people. That's key. I always check that to see who's inviting people. If I have 3 comics on the show and I've got one that's not inviting, I'll come to them and say, hey, I noticed you haven't invited anybody to the show. Please get out there and send it to your network. And if you've done that before, you'll know that that's a really easy thing to do now, because anytime you've invited people to a show or something similar to that, you can just click a button and it'll re-invite the same people. So you're not asking for a heavy lift most of the time to get your friends and venue hosts to invite their crowd to the show. And that's the number one best way to do it, is to get them to actually make the invite. So they're engaging with the invite.
Also, that having them as co-hosts of the event, even without them actively inviting people, it will show up on their calendars. So even it'll show up as their event. So it becomes a way of promoting passively. Because even if they're not actively sending out the invites, it's still showing up on their calendar that their friends are going to see that it's an upcoming event that they have.
That's right. And if any friends have decided to either go or become interested in it, Facebook does its own engaging with it and essentially reminds them with notifications, hey, your event, Dan and Josh's comedy show, is coming up this weekend. Get your ass there. So it does a good job of that. And that's a key thing. And when you send your invite out, you can always be sure and ask and send messages along with it too that say, hey, if you're interested, click interested, because I want you to come to this, so that you have a specific ask that you're making anytime you're engaging with someone. And that goes with anything we're going to cover in this step. When you're engaging with someone, tell them how. Either, say you're going to this, or, become interested in this, like click interest on this, or buy a ticket, whatever the engagement ask is. So it goes without saying that you want to go to other social platforms as well. So Instagram and Facebook are both owned by the same company called Meta. And essentially that means that anything you put on Facebook, you can also replicate in Instagram. Most people know that about those platforms, but some don't. Twitter is something that you can do Twitter ads for your event, but you'll have to recreate the event in Twitter to do that. But a lot of times, if you're sending email newsletters out or creating events, it gives you an option to tweet it. YouTube is another place you can do that. That would obviously require a video. But if you have a YouTube channel, you have a lot of active subscribers, and you promote on that a lot, that's not a bad idea. This next one is important. So we're still on engagement, but we're going to talk about email newsletters. I would say that most of the time when I have someone from my network attend a show, and then I ask them how they heard about it, they say, I got your email promoting it, because that's how they're listening for it. And email is still a very relevant way to engage a lot of people at the same time with the same message. So an email newsletter is insanely valuable. Anytime you're doing promo to a show, you're getting people there. It's very important that when people are there, that you're capturing their emails and that you're building your list consistently. Now, that's something that we'll cover a little bit more in the special 4th episode that we have only available for Patreon subscribers.
Subscribers.
There it is. So those email newsletters are really important. We'll talk about how to build that up on that special episode, but still, that is a really, really important component, is the email newsletter. So don't forget about that. The other component to email is that we mentioned this before, but many times the venue has emails. Also, don't underestimate neighborhood associations or community associations around your venue. So I used to promote a show that's in a part of town in Kansas City called the River Market. The River Market had an association, and the association put events on their website. They put events in their newsletter and sent them out. And a lot of the people that lived in that neighborhood went to events because they were told by the association that they were going on. I looked into it, and for $100 a year, I could have my comedy shows put on their website anytime I was doing them. And they would send newsletters out to their people promoting them. And man, did I get a lot of people to come to comedy shows doing that. So that's a good example of something that you can do to use email newsletters where you have someone else sending it on your behalf. That's even better. So find ways to link up with other people's newsletters so that you can get your show mentioned if you can find that.
Yeah. And another way just that you can do with this too, and we don't really go into a lot of detail or depth with this, but you can get sponsors for your events as well. So, say you're booking a show where you're bringing in talent from out of town, maybe you get a hotel to sponsor it, and part of that sponsorship is they're trading a room for their sponsorship. So then you can put your comic up, but in that sponsorship, you can then ask them to be promoting your event to their guests, whenever your show's happening. And then again, party flyers, the desk people will be handing them out, so on and so forth. So again, building them partnerships.
Yep. Definitely plays into this. So last thing I would mention here are texts and phone calls. So this sounds really obvious, but if you want to reach somebody, you want to ask them to come to the show, the most personal way to do it is to text them or call them and ask them to come. So don't be shy to ask your fellow comics to do the same thing. Say, look, man, if we want to sell this out and have a great show, reach out to people who you want to come there directly. A lot of times we don't want to sort of break the plane of social network when we're making asks like this, but those direct channels are really important for engagement.
That's right. If you call somebody, you can make them feel really bad and guilt them into coming to your comedy show.
Yeah. Hey, man.
This comedy show is brought to you by guilt.
Yeah. Hello, Dan. Dude, did you? I noticed you weren't at my comedy show last night. Yeah, no, I wasn't. Oh, yeah. Well, it's tonight. So.
Oh, it's tonight.
Yeah, that's pretty tricky.
I suppose. I don't. I guess I'll be there.
There you go. See how it works? Yeah. So yeah, promote it like my mom. Definitely bring in that guilt. So So impact.
Yeah, right. This comedy show is brought to you by everybody's mom.
Nice. So last thing to cover in impact is the ticket link. So this isn't a very long section. Impact is all the way down at the bottom of the funnel. This is where you want somebody to make a decision. So if awareness is people finding out about the show for the first time, if engagement is people considering whether or not to come to your show, where you have a lot of interaction with them and you can influence that decision, a ticket link, when they get to the place, is where they actually, you want them to make the decision to buy a ticket and go to your show. So we recommend using Eventbrite for your ticket link. That is where you'll include all the show details. So one of the big pro tips Dan and I wanted you to know on this episode in particular was that too often we see comics who are including every last word of every comic's bio in the Facebook event, on the poster, everything about it. The time to give away all the show details is on the ticket page itself. So you can tease out. So the further you get down the funnel, you can give away more details about the show. You obviously, on the poster, you want to know what comics are going to be there. You obviously want to say what time it is and what it is and where. Those are important things that should be at all steps of the funnel. But when you get all the way down here is where you can start linking to videos. You can start talking about the bios. You can have lots of information on the comics. Feel free to load out your ticketing page with everything you think a person needs to make a decision about coming to that show. That's the place for it, not higher up in the funnel. So don't word vomit all over your Facebook invite. Make sure that you have something succinct that's just about getting them to go and click on the ticket link and then move further down the funnel. So each layer of the funnel is just meant to get them to the next layer. But impact, it's time to seal the deal. So put the details in the ticket link. All right. So it wouldn't be a show if we didn't talk about some traps to avoid. Avoiding. Man, I really missed out on my hype man on that one. That's just real swing and a miss right there, Dan. Come on.
Sorry, I thought about it, but I was like, am I beating a dead? Yeah, I avoided the trap. Thank you, John,
Jeez.
for the. I was like, am I beating a dead horse here?
Beating a dead horse. All right. So not having a checklist is a trap to avoid. So we mentioned this on the last show. Whenever you are putting your shows together, it's important to have a list of all the things that you need to bring with you. But it's also important to have a checklist of all the different places you go to promote, so that the next time you do a show, you know where to go. Next, starting too late. We talked about this before, but this time we're talking about the promotion. So if you start your promotion too late, you're not gonna like the results for that. You're not giving people enough time to get all the way through the consideration funnel. You got to kind of think about someone's perspective. If they're going to come to the show, they need to make plans. In some cases, they need to get babysitters or make other arrangements to be there. You've got to give people time to go through those steps. So starting too late is a big no-no.
Yeah.
So
and with that, what do you have, like a time frame that you try to use? For me personally, I try to, if I'm going to be promoting something, or like if I have a show that I want to do that I'm producing, I like to be able to have at least a month, 3 to 4 weeks to get everything going.
Well, if I were to walk back through some of the things that we talked about tonight on this episode, I would say that you're planning for the show, all the things that you need to have in place about when it's going to be, what time, where, all those things do need to be in place a month ahead of time at least. You're absolutely right. When it comes to putting things out there at the top of the funnel, so awareness building activities, I think those things should be done 3 to 4 weeks out. engagement where I've got an actual Facebook event and I'm starting to push it with email and I'm starting to make asks and I'm getting comics in the venue to invite people 2 to 3 weeks out. Give that time. So you want to have this follow a person's ability to consider it. And then a ticket link fully built out, a place to go, making the hard sell starts happening, 10 days to 2 weeks out. Got a good comment there. I think Darren said that 2 to 3 weeks for paid ads. That's a good thought. I think that's, if you're going to pay for ads, you have to keep in mind if you're going to have it that far out, how much you want to spend on it. A lot of times I find, that for, under $20, you can run a Facebook ad that essentially takes your invite and it essentially boosts that event and it advertises it to people in your consideration set, and you can totally design the profile of person that you want to come right down, because it's Facebook. They know their interests. So if they follow comics or anything like that, they're more likely to want to come to comedy according to their algorithm, and it'll show them those things at key times. And starting it ahead of time is always ideal, but you got to keep your budget in mind as well. Another problem that can happen is not checking competing local events. So if you go to a small town, but it's homecoming and everybody's not, going to be there, that's a problem. If you're doing it right next door to, if Aziz Ansari's in town and you're doing your comedy show across the street, now, lots of different thoughts.
Opening night of NFL.
Yeah. Anytime around
any major sporting event.
and here's what I've found, guys. Like Labor Day-ish kind of weekend, August shows tend to be slow. Anytime around school starting has been slow for me. I've never really done a successful show in the August to September timeframe. Where I've done really well is January, February, March, April, July, where it's really hot. June and July have gotten good crowds, and then later in the year, like in November, as well. But some of those, just for whatever reason, the sort of going back to school time frame is just, people are just moving around a lot, and there's just a lot going on.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so we got a couple comments here. He said, John said I had an open mic crush by the Red Wedding. What is the Red Wedding?
Oh, that's Game of Thrones. It's an episode of Game of Thrones.
Oh, okay. I know what Game of Thrones is, but I guess I didn't. Yeah. I don't know them specifically by episode.
That's funny. Yeah, everybody was tuning into that show.
That's funny.
And he's like, "Well,
I'm gonna be honest. If I had to make a choice between watching an open mic and watching Game of Thrones, I'm probably gonna go watch Game of Thrones."
That's right. Well, that's a big one. Yeah, I've been watching the new one that they have out, and it is a lot better than I thought it was going to be.
Really? Because I maybe unpopular opinion, but I'm not into it. Yeah. I've been watching it, and I've been also simultaneously been watching Lord of the Rings and the Rings of Power series. And I gotta be honest, I like the Lord of the Rings series better. I think.
Yeah. That one is really good, but I gotta say, I really like the new Game of Thrones show. Like, it's
to each their own.
I mean, like, I think the dialogue is good. It's very character driven. They don't rely on action too much.
And see, that's exactly why I don't like it, is because there's not enough. To me, it's boring and slow, and there's not enough action.
Well, I don't know how far you've got into it, but I checked out the most recent episode. At the time we're recording this, I think that's episode 7.
Yeah, I've watched. I'm current.
You're caught up. Okay.
I'm also another thing that I don't like about it is the sexual exploitations of this show, because it's a lot of it alludes to a lot of incest and or pedophilia, and to me, that's a little weird.
Yeah, it's not an easy subject, but it's always been part of the lore of Game of Thrones. It's
no, for sure.
yeah,
That's definitely not the first time. But we
like went down a weird.
That's like a whole new podcast. We just start talking about debating about Game of Thrones and House of Dragons.
But these are things people do when they don't come to comedy show, guys. That's what we're trying to say here, is that, you know, you have to think about if you have a good show that's going on, maybe that's not the night to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think John learned his lesson about that. But hey, that's it, guys. We've gone through all of our avoiding traps, and we're taking some comments.
Open for some questions. And Darren left a comment. He said one of his clients was upstaged by a sheep fest, and he's not kidding. I believe that. You're in Wyoming, so that checks out. 100% checks out.
Sheep fest or comedy?
I'm going to Sheep Fest.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll give just a few minutes for questions, and then if nobody asks questions, we'll get this wrapped up. Again, for John and Darren, we can just address you by name because you're the only two watching live. We appreciate you watching live, but we will be also, for those listening, once this is out on the RSS feed. Thank you for listening. Got a couple more comments. Darren said that they only got 75 people instead of 300. Ooh, that's tough. Mm-hmm. And then John says, I don't have any questions, but I did take some good notes. I have a good venue and we'll take them to the owners. Oh, well, that's fantastic. And I'm pretty sure I know what venue you're talking about. So, because it's definitely a good venue if it's the one I'm thinking.
Nice. All right.
And I'm right. Yeah. So if you're ever in Aberdeen, South Dakota, go support Hub City Event Center. They put on a lot of great events, a lot of great not just comedy events, but they have open mics and they have music events and all kinds of stuff there. So it's a great venue. I could be biased because they booked me and it was a fun show, but yeah, and I sold out. Yeah, that's another reason to be biased for that venue. One of the only times I've sold out. Anyway, it doesn't seem like we have any questions. If you do have questions at a later time, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I want to maybe ask some questions, here's a couple things ways you can connect with us. You can connect with us, follow us on Facebook, the Art of Bombing Pod. You can join the Art of Bombing Pod Facebook group. If you're not already part of that, go to the group. Then you can ask questions in that group. You can also get at us by email. The email is theartofbombingpod@gmail.com. That's theartofbombingpod@gmail.com. You can email us if you have some questions, or you can reach out to Josh or myself through our Facebook, our social medias, all the stuff. So any questions out there, we'd love to try to help you. And again, if you're not part of the Patreon, become part of the Patreon, because we're going to be releasing some assets that will be coming out in addition to these 3 parts. We've got some assets that, such as the checklist. We've got some checklists. We've got some templates and some other things that are going to be exclusive only to the Patreon supporters. And we're also going to be doing a special part 4 that is exclusive to Patreon only. So if you're not in any of that, make sure you join the Patreon and keep following us wherever you're following us. And thanks for listening and all that jazz. And I think we're ready to get out of here.
All right, Dan. Good times. Thanks for everybody for coming, and enjoy.
Thank you. It's the Art of Bombing.